Hey guys, it's Heather Bowers with Aviator Mentor. I've been in the airline industry since 2012, and since that time, I've been able to recruit, interview, and hire thousands of airline pilots for 2 regional airlines and the largest airline in the world. So today, we're going to be talking about the 12 reasons why you may not be getting a phone call from your choice airline. So thanks for sticking with me. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more of my content. Like this video, send me a comment, and let's get to it. Number 1. Have you applied? And I know that sounds crazy, but I met so many people that I actually grew to like and I was really fond of, and I'd write their name down and I'd go back to headquarters just to find out they don't even have an application on file. So number 1 is apply, okay? And make sure that whichever airline you're applying for, complete the entire application. Some of the airlines use airlineapps.com, and within their application, they have what's called an addendum. It's at the very bottom of the application, and it's airline specific. If you do not complete that addendum, your application is considered incomplete, and it may not ever get viewed. So make sure that the entire application is complete. So go online, check the status of your application, make sure it is complete, and you may want to hire a professional service or company like Aviator Mentor to take a look at your application for you and make sure that you didn't miss anything important. Number 2 is, do you meet the minimum requirements? Every airline has their own minimum requirements section. You can find it on their website, and many of you may still be at the certified flight instructor level, and maybe you don't know anybody in the industry and you're applying to American and United and Delta, and you need to realize that you don't have an ATP yet and you may need an ATP. Or some of you may not have a 4-year college degree, and depending on what airlines you're applying for, that may be required. Another requirement may be to be a United States citizen, and maybe you haven't completed that yet. Maybe you haven't filed that paperwork yet. I don't know, but check the website and make sure that you look and see whether or not you meet the minimum requirements for each airline that you're applying for. Number 3 is your flight time competitive? There's a difference between meeting the minimum requirements and being a competitive pilot. Okay, so this will be different for military and civilian. Historically, military pilots will have a lower total flight time than the average civilian pilot, but this is where you'll want to go on to career forums and check out the airline that you're interested in, ask around and see, hey, those of you that are now getting hired now, how much flight time do you have? And what does your resume look like? What kind of experience do you have that maybe I don't have? You also may want to check into a career conference and job fairs, talk to those airlines and ask them directly, hey, what's considered competitive at your airline? Here's the experience that I have, and what do I need to do to make myself more competitive? Reason number 4, while you may not be hearing from the airlines, is maybe you didn't score high enough on their personality assessment. Now, the legacy airlines usually have some sort of assessment tied in with the application system. For example, American Airlines has what's called an organizational fit assessment. United Airlines has the Hogan. So if you do not score high enough on these assessments, that's telling the airlines that although you may be a good aviator and a good pilot, you may not necessarily fit in their company culture. And that's why they do that, okay? They want to make sure that you are going to fit in with the culture they are trying to build in that airline. Depending on the airline that you're interested in, if you do not pass or score high enough on the assessment, then 2 things can happen. The first is they could say, hey, thanks but no thanks. We appreciate that you're interested in us, but we are not interested in you because you may not be a good fit. And the second is, why don't you try again in 6 months? And you may be asking, well, how do I know if I fall within those 2 categories? And honestly, for the longest time, the airlines weren't very good at being transparent enough to tell you that. But I know they have been making some changes to change that, thankfully. And for example, American Airlines, when you log on to Pilot Credentials, that's the website they utilize to accept your pilot application. You'll log on to your home page once you complete your profile, and if you did not score high enough on the organizational fit assessment, you will see a red X, and it will tell you, hey, you know what, you didn't score high enough, but that's okay. Try again in 6 months. You can reapply on this date. And they tell you that. If you scored high enough, then you're going to see all green check marks on your home page. Now you may be thinking, okay, I don't think I passed any of those assessments, so what do I do now? At that point, I would tell you, find as many internal references that you can for that specific airline. Make those relationships, see if you know anybody that is actively flying for the airline, and see if they will write you a letter of recommendation, and that may help your case. Number 5 is, when is the last time you updated your airline application? If you have not updated in the past 90 days, the airlines are assuming that you are no longer interested and they will not look at your application. I always recommend update it one time every 30 days. When you're going and you're paying your rent, you're making your mortgage payment, you're paying your monthly bills, that is a good time to give yourself a reminder to log in and update your flight times on your application. And that's the other thing, is when you're logging into that application and you're wondering, well, what is it I'm supposed to be updating? It's your flight time. Your flight time will change, hopefully, every week if you're actively flying, no matter where you are, and you'll want to let the airline know and keep them up to date with your current experience. So again, make sure you're updating at least once every 30 days. It will not benefit you to update it more frequently than that. I've met some pilots that tell me, you know what, I log in after every single trip, after every week, and I update that. And that's great, but that's not going to help you. So at least do it once every 30 days. Any more than that's really not needed. But if you haven't updated it recently, they may just assume that you are no longer interested. Number 6 is, do you have any letters of recommendation on file with that airline? And I'm going to follow that up with, what kind of letters, okay? We want quality over quantity, always. And if you're applying for United, for example, I would not be turning in letters of recommendation from pilots that are flying for another airline, like American and Delta. You want to show that you are there for them, that you will fit within their pilot culture, and that you already know people at that airline that are willing to vouch for you and put their neck out and say, yeah, he or she would be a really good fit here. So make sure that they are internal letters of recommendation. They are an active pilot at that airline. Now, a few of you have asked me, well, hey, I know a management employee or maybe a flight attendant from that airline. Can they write me a letter? Absolutely. They can write you the letter. Just make sure that the letter is quality, okay? And nothing will weigh more, nothing means more to the airlines than letters from their current airline pilots. Remember, you're applying to be an airline pilot. So your fellow airline pilots and what they have to say about you will mean more than what any other employee in the company will have to say about you. Now, with the letter of recommendations, I want to caution you, okay? Be very careful who you choose to ask to write you a letter of recommendation, because for American Airlines, those pilots can go actually into the pilot credential portal. They need to provide their name, their email, their employee number, and they can upload the letter on your behalf so it shows up in the system. But what you don't know is they also have the opportunity to say, yes, I recommend this person, or no, I don't recommend this person. And they can choose to hide their letter and comments from you. So they could be writing a letter for you, but you don't know what it says, and you don't know if they're really recommending you. And there have been people in the past that have turned in a letter of recommendation but said, unfortunately, I cannot recommend this pilot. And so be very careful who you ask to write a letter for you, because that's a big deal. Okay, number 7 is a touchy subject, but number 7 is, how many Checkride failures do you have? And this also pairs with the how many aircraft accidents, incidents, and violations do you have? So some airlines have a cutoff, and if you have more failures than a certain number, they will not bring you in, okay? Now, if you have met that maximum number, something they can do is have an upper level management review your application, review your file, and sign off on you to bring you in for an interview, but it could hold up the process, and that could be one reason why you haven't heard anything. Now, I want to caution you, make sure you are being completely honest and transparent on your application about Checkride failures. I have seen several pilots lose their job and blow it at their dream airlines because they did not disclose everything, and the airlines will find out, okay? Something else to keep in mind, some pilots don't understand the difference between a stage check failure and a Checkride failure, okay? So that's something else to keep in mind, and you'll want to look into that so that you can disclose the 100% accuracy on your application. There have been a few times where I've invited pilots to come and interview, and before we started the interview, I always review their logbooks. And when I go to the back and I'm looking at their endorsement pages and I'm looking for a certain regulation number that tells me whether or not they needed some retraining in order to successfully pass that Checkride, I will sometimes stumble across an extra Checkride failure that maybe they forgot about or they didn't want to disclose. And I've had to walk people out and send them home before the interview even started. So don't be one of those people. Make sure that you know exactly what Checkrides you've failed. Make sure you're being transparent about it, okay? I know it's one of those things that people have a lot of anxiety about. I know that some of you are really embarrassed about it, and you'd be surprised. We see failures very often, okay? So don't feel bad about it. It's a learning experience, but just make sure that you're upfront with it. And if we have any questions or issues with it, then it's brought up in the interview, and that gives you an opportunity to explain yourself a little bit more and paint the picture to tell us what happened. But just make sure that you're disclosing that information for us. Number 8 is, well, what is the quality of your application? How is your spelling and your formatting? Did you forget to check a few boxes that tells the airlines that you're actually not qualified to fly? Go in, make sure that all the information is true and accurate. And this is really where you might want to hire a professional company like Aviator Mentor to take a look at that for you, go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that you're not missing anything. Something else are spelling errors. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you have an application full of spelling errors, we assume that you're not taking this seriously, and we may not want to bring you in for an interview, okay? So all we're going off of, we're making a judgment on you based on what you are providing us. So make sure it's polished. Something else that you want to look at and make sure is accurate are the flight times that you're disclosing on your application. Do not round your numbers. When we see a lot of very round numbers, such as 100 hours of multi-engine time, 1,000 hours of PIC time, 150, 250, 3, very round numbers, not specific, that's a red flag for us. And that's telling us that you're not being completely honest in the application. You probably don't have that much flight time, and we may not bring you in. We need to know that whatever numbers are in your logbook matches what is on your application. So double check that, make sure you're not rounding up, okay? Put the exact numbers where they need to be. Now, number 9 is the addendum section on your application. So my question would be, do you have any red flags or potential red flags in your addendum, or have you not completed the addendum? Now again, every airline could have their own addendum, especially when we're working with airline apps. And so when you're flying for United and you scroll to the very bottom of the application, same for Delta, they have their airline specific questions that they want to ask you. Even the regional airlines do. And if you have any aircraft accidents, incidents, violations, if you've been convicted of any crime ever and you've disclosed some of that information, that could be what's considered a potential red flag to the airline and could cause a delay in either contacting you for an interview or even hiring you. When you come in for the interview, that's something that you will be asked about again. If they feel it's a potential issue, then it may take longer to give you an answer on whether or not you pass the interview process. So you'll want to take a look at that, make sure the addendum is complete, make sure you're being transparent and honest, because again, we're going to find out, okay? So do those things and that will help you out. Okay, number 10 is, have you attended any professional aviation conferences? And the reason I ask this is because in the past, I don't know if they're still doing this, but in the past, a few airlines have been known to give you extra points or stars, brownie points for attending that aviation conference, for making an effort to go and see them and actively talk to their recruiters and hiring manager and airline pilots. And that shows them your level of interest. So 3 of the conferences I'm referring to are the Women in Aviation International Conference, Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, and the National Gay Pilots Association. All 3 of those organizations do have a yearly conference. Most of the airlines are in attendance. And if you're going, make sure you're going with an updated application, updated resume. Make sure everything is up to date for those people so that you are ready to go and you look prepared, okay? Now, some airlines may say, you know, if you come to see us, that's great, and we value you and we value your time, but unfortunately, we don't give you any extra brownie points or stars in the system for coming. So what you could do is you could attend a conference and go and find some mentors. Go and find some people, some pilots that already work at that airline, and see if maybe you can get to know them, and maybe in the future they can write you a letter of recommendation. Okay, network, get to know the companies, feel out what the airline culture is like. So that's a few reasons why you might want to check into a conference and see what it's all about. Number 11 is, are you a well-rounded individual? And companies are looking for great pilots and aviators, but they're also looking for good human beings. Are you a good human? Are you volunteering in your community? Are you doing anything extra on the side to mentor people? What are you doing to make your surroundings a better place? And that does play in to the overall picture you're painting for the airline. Now, I know some of you are thinking, you know, I just do not have time for that. You know, maybe you have several children. Maybe your spouse is also a pilot and both of you are trying to balance work life, and one of you is gone and one of you is home. I understand. I get that. That's okay. And if you're not able to volunteer, that's okay too. What professional memberships do you have then? Start thinking about, well, what else can I do to maybe give me a slight edge on all the other pilots that are applying? And what can I do to become a better human and care about the people around me and to leave a place better than I found it? Now, number 12 is, you know, maybe you just need to be a little bit patient. You could be doing all of the right things. You could be very competitive. You could meet the minimum requirements, and you could have scored high on their personality assessment or organizational fit assessment. You just have to wait. Be patient. Trust the process. Each airline is only able to handle hiring a certain number of pilots every single year, okay? And maybe you just need to wait for your number and your name to be called. So again, trust the process, make sure your application's up to date, be patient, make sure you have some internal letters of recommendation, and try and enjoy where you are in life right now. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I hope this video was helpful for you. If so, please let me know. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like my content. I will be making more videos. I'm really excited to start helping all of you. Please consider me as a resource as you are going through your pilot career, no matter what stage you're at. I'm here to help. And check out my website, www.aviatormentor.com. You can check out the link below. Thanks so much.